tonight's topic is, we were going to call it personal responsibility. We were going to call it how to talk to your kids about what happened at the Capitol. Like all these names sort of floating around, but honestly, they're all euphemisms, because really all we want to say is, what the fuck just happened? How did the Capitol get attacked by white people? Like, let's break it down one piece at a time. We'll start with how the Capitol, and then we'll go get it attacked, and then we'll go like white people, like all like one piece at a time. But in the meantime, this is Parenting Porcupines season 2. Thank you for being with us. We are 12 episodes this particular season, and it's me, Casey Whitener. I'm a homeschool mom. I say that like all the time with furrowed brow. My daughter's 12. She's Holly, my daughter, is 12. And so then there's Jessica. Jessica, tell us who you are, where you are, and who your kids are. And let's go round robin around the table.
Sounds good. Hey, everybody. I'm Jessica, and I'm in the upstate of South Carolina. I live in Greenville. I've got 2 boys. Jackson is 12, and Caldwell will be 9 next month.
Alex, that's you.
Oh, that's my bad. I'm Alex. I live in Charleston, and I have a 1.5-year-old little man named Perry.
And Melissa?
I am also in the Low Country, one city removed in North Charleston. My kids are 6, 7, and 10. My baby turned 6 yesterday, and I don't even believe it's been that long. It's crazy.
It goes by fast.
It really does. Life gets on fast forward when the kids start aging. Mm-hmm. All right, Jessica, before we got on the air, we were starting here. We were talking about what happened last week, the storming of the Capitol, this concept of were we hypocrites? And let me go back to this real fast. So I straight up said in the fall that in Portland, if those protesters were going to take the federal building, they should be allowed to do so. I've come out 100% against putting federal troops between protesters and the property upon which they're protesting. And I think at the time, I didn't believe that the protesters were the ones that were the aggressors. I believed at the time that the police and the military being put there in first place was the aggression. And so I believe that the protesters were being peaceful. So when what happened 2 weeks ago at the Capitol, in a like weird and also predictable turn of phrase, all of those Trump people said to me, well, you were okay with people storming the federal buildings in Portland, but you're not okay with them storming the Capitol. And I think, true, I'm a big time hypocrite on this. I've never been to Portland. I have, in fact, been to the Capitol, and I do believe that the Capitol is a monument for our democracy. And I was pissed about the people storming the Capitol, whether they look like me or not, whether they're Trump supporters or not. People pushing their way past Capitol Police, carrying podiums out, kicking their feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. All this desecration pissed me off. But when we first started talking about this, Jessica, you were like, I'm cool. Like, there's some insurrection happening. Let's feel good about this. So let's kick it to you. Like, how do you feel? Like, how did you feel when you're seeing that happening at the Capitol?
Well, here's the thing. So the day that it happened, I was just back from Christmas vacation. So I was catching up at work. So, I mean, I sat down at my desk. I did not leave my desk until well after 5 o'clock. And so my husband had gotten home. The kids were there. We were, getting ready for dinner, and I turned on the news, like I always do. And I'm standing there just watching it. And I just busted out laughing because, like, at that point, I mean, I had no idea. That the world was on fire. But I just started laughing because at that point, like, there was nothing more I could do. But when we started talking about, our second season and how we wanted to come back, and then this happened, it just seemed really fitting that we have this conversation about accountability, because we've talked about personal responsibility and how important it is that you take responsibility for your actions, that you make amends when you harm someone. But we haven't talked about accountability as much, which is an equally important conversation and along very similar lines, but they are very different concepts. And I think this is the perfect way to discuss that, because we see these two groups of people, right? You've got Trump supporters who were protesting at the Capitol, who last summer were up in arms about Black Lives Matter protesting in all the locations that they were protesting. And so that idea that we have to have the same measuring stick, right? You can't say that they were wrong and then turn around and do the same thing and expect to be taken seriously. So that's just kind of where this came from, this discussion. And it was so funny because I was telling y'all before we went live, Jackson, my 12-year-old, when we were watching all of this stuff like happening, he looked at me and he's like, wait a minute, Mom, weren't these the same people last summer who were really mad about the other protests? How is that right? Are they hypocrites? And I'm like, seems that way, kid. So, but having that discussion about, first of all, it's federal property. Like that really didn't bother me as much. It was more the hypocrisy and the aftermath of there not being any real accountability among those people, really. So
their peers are not holding them accountable. They make excuses that it was Antifa infiltrated.
Right. Right. Exactly.
No, your side did something stupid.
Yep.
Call them out on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what you tell your friends, right? If your friend is doing something stupid, say something. You can't just watch them do stupid stuff. If you care about them and you're friends and you want to continue this relationship, you tell them when they're wrong.
Absolutely.
So, Melissa, have your kids been watching it? Have they seen the news coverage? How did you talk to them about it?
Honestly, we don't watch the news. The only news coverage my children have seen of it was at 7:25. I turned on ABC to watch Jeopardy because it was the last week of Alex Trebek shows.
Yes.
And they were showing me this idiocy. And I was so mad. I got on Facebook. I got on Twitter. I sent an email to ABC in Charleston going, hello, these people are not saying anything new. Take a half-hour break and put on Jeopardy. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was not the only one. I posted on their Facebook page and everyone else is like, yeah, this is dumb. Turn it off. Put on Jeopardy. So that's literally the only news coverage my children have seen of.
Well, our local station kept Jeopardy on because that's what I was watching when Jessica texted me, I'm just catching up with the events of the day. And I was like, wait, what? What events of what day? And when I looked at it, I was like, what's happening right now? So to your point.
That's the first time I knew anything was happening.
Yeah, me too. I wasn't watching it all day. I wasn't expecting this to sort of unfold in the storytelling. And when Holly came downstairs, she goes, what's happening? I was like, these people are idiots. And the only response is she's like, why are they doing that? I was like, because they're idiots. Like I didn't have a rational understanding of what was happening other than like there was a rally at wherever the president was, right, at the Ellipse, and then there was a storming of the Capitol, and off these people went, and into the Capitol building they went, and like they're dumb, like the whole thing was like they're just dumb, they're just being dumb. Like I didn't have a go ahead.
Yeah, and my they've heard more radio, listen to the news on the radio. And we made the connection that, all summer we're saying the right is saying, we're with you as long as you're peaceful. The minute you start rioting and doing stuff, that's it. We don't support your cause anymore. You have no point that's valid at all because you rioted, because some idiots in your group rioted. Like, well, the same goes for them. So,
Yeah, one would think, right?
That, yeah. No, your argument. Well, don't you think there was election fraud? Probably there was some, but you've lost all credibility at this point. You had a point. I reject your point now. You're done. Not listening to you anymore. Yeah.
At the risk of getting in a lot of trouble for saying this, I just have to say, I was disappointed in, oh gosh, how do I say this? The ability to revolt. Where were the guillotines? Where were the muskets?
Yes, it was not serious.
All I saw was people taking selfies. And I was like, that's not the America that I was promised.
This is not libertarians overthrowing.
Very disappointed.
This is not a real boogaloo, guys. This is
right.
not.
Yeah.
This is not what that looks like.
No.
And to be clear,
additional violence, I would just say I think Alex has a point in that there was a gal that was interviewed from Tennessee, and she said, "This is a revolution." And the question I have, and really, we are all libertarians. I think at different times in our conversation, we've talked about how working within the system is a challenge, and the system is built against third party. The system, as a two-party system, has continued to fortify itself against third parties. And yet the idea we're going to have an armed revolution and overthrow the government has not actually actively been part of our conversations. And so my question to you is like, I mean, if this were Jimmy Fallon, I'd be like, are you a coward and not willing to be a revolutionary? But my real question is like, I think the reason we know that we're not like revolutionaries is because we're thinking about how to peaceably respond to the things that we see. And legitimately, I'm looking at the Women's March in 2016, 2017. I was there, right? There were no riots. There was no armed guard. There was no Boogaloo Boys. Like, people were pissed off in 2017 that Donald Trump had been elected. People were worried about the Supreme Court. There was 1 million women show up and march in the Women's March, and yet there was no National Guard called out to respond to this, partly because it's the day after inauguration. They're not rejecting what happened as far as the presidential election is concerned, and partly because these women weren't there armed and trying to overthrow the government. And so that, like, all of that is still playing in my head. So to Jessica's point about like, I'm seeing this, I'm trying to think about, I'm looking at 4 years ago at like, how do we respond when we were unhappy? And it wasn't storming the Capitol and stealing the bust of Lincoln out of the White House. It feels to me like there's a difference here.
well, my question is, where are these people every time Congress gives themselves a raise?
Thank you.
You know, like why are we? I feel like
Right target, wrong reason.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean,
all this up.
if we think about this, but another thing too, like, and I've heard the narrative, like, what if they were brown? How would this have played out if they had been brown? And you know, and I've actually got friends I've got a friend who was in She is she works for one of the congressmen, and she was there, and she, talked about how scary it was and all of that. So I want to make sure that our viewers know that we are certainly not making light of the terrifying experience that those people had.
Sure.
We don't want to make light of the loss of life that happened, because there were people who died as a result of what happened. Granted, they died as a result of their actions, but I think it's just important to have that conversation about, this has happened. Like, you did this, so what happens now? Like, and we're starting to see people being arrested and things like that. And so, which is good, I guess, in some ways, maybe. What are your thoughts on that? Like, people being arrested for this violent protest?
That I'm fine with. It's the worry about programs that are going to be put in place to stop something like this from happening again.
Yeah.
The Patriot Act.
Yeah.
Expanding what not enticement. Oh my God, I can't remember words again. What are they saying Trump did?
Insurrection?
Nope, there's another word for it. Like, he egged them on. He told them to do
Incited?
Incited. Yeah. They're going to expand the legal definition of inciting violence. So more speech falls under that, and then they can take you down, because you can't, that's against the First Amendment. So those are my worries. I'm not worried about the people getting arrested for doing idiotic stuff. I'm worried about the future that they're going to start pushing to stop this from happening again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alex, weigh in on how you feel at this point, and then let's, after that, bump off of what Melissa said about this idea of punishing the president, because I do think we should weigh in on that too. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, I took a couple of notes while we were talking before we went live. Perry obviously is not even part of the conversation, because all he knows is Charlie Brown right now. He doesn't know anything else that's going on. But I think everything that happened is such an important reminder that we have to put our own motives under a microscope. The people that were there, that were condemning people that were there before, just like we've been talking about, the hypocrisy is disgusting. And it's just a great reminder, as libertarians who are outside of the system, who's to say that we couldn't be doing the same thing one day? So we have to put our motives under a microscope. We have to play devil's advocate with the reasoning why we're doing things, and be like, what's the other side of that coin? Like, we have to be so careful to always have a strong message that we don't waver off of, that our actions follow along with. And just seeing these people who don't do that, it's sad and pathetic, and I'm glad not to be one of them. But I could very easily be one of them in certain situations. So just like Melissa was saying, we have to keep each other accountable in communities. We have to keep our personal selves accountable as individuals. It's just really, really important that we don't look foolish like they ultimately did.
You know what I love about that too is, like, when we think about the constrictions of a group, it's not about policy. It's not about rules. It's about, what are we willing to accept as acceptable behavior? And if, as a team, as an organization, we say South Carolina libertarians are not willing to do this, right? Or, the four of us, parenting porcupines is not willing to do this, right? Like, in whatever fraction you can break it down to, this is how we operate, this is what we do. And when things happen outside of that, we reprimand that. You don't represent us when you walk outside of that particular line. And we had a great conversation about that today with the South Carolina Libertarian Party and the social media team, where we talked about on Facebook, like, how does Facebook respond to things that are happening? And should that Facebook response be universal it doesn't matter which of us that are Facebook admins respond, but the universal response should always be caring and encouraging and trying to elevate the Libertarian Party, right? And so when we think about that, we go, okay, as a group, we want to operate in this particular way. So I think it's important to think about that from a communications perspective, but also on the side of like, as a parent, right? Like you look at your kid and you're like, obviously Perry at this point is like, deuces, I don't care, you know? But our kids that are a little bit older, they're asking us like, hey, what does this mean? And how should I respond to this? And I admittedly handled it probably poorly when we're watching it on as it's happening. And Holly says to me, like, what's happening? And I go, these are crazy people. Like, they're crazy people. They think they're part of a revolution, but they're not. Like they're under the influence of some weird internet. And you know, she stops listening. So I don't know necessarily. In a future broadcast, we'll talk about what this crisis cycle looks like, where the news gives us the like how to talk to your kids about insurrection. But for me, as she's saying this, I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know. I don't know why. For me, it was okay in Portland for individuals who are that angry to burn the place down. Like, to me, it was like, do it, burn it down. Just don't send any federal troops to confront them, because the federal troops indicate a maybe a kingship or a monarchy kind of approach, right? So for me, I was like, don't put federal troops out there. Portland will work their own shit out. Everything will be fine. And then when what happened at the Capitol, I was like, these people can't be allowed to run into the Capitol. Like, that's not okay. And my husband was like, you're a hypocrite. And I go, well, yeah, because I don't give a rat's ass about Portland, but I've been to the Capitol and that shit's not okay. It's not okay to run all over the Capitol. And so I've been trying to work that out for the last 2 weeks. Like, what is that hypocrisy? What does it really mean? And I'm struggling with that. So hopefully you guys can help me on this. Jessica, what do you think? Like, is there a difference between protesters throwing Molotov cocktails at the federal building in Portland versus protesters storming the Capitol? Like, people are saying there's a difference there, but I don't know what the difference is. Can you?
I don't think. I mean, I don't think there is. I don't think there is. I mean, yeah, I don't think there is. I don't. When I think about that, like, I don't have a problem with somebody destroying federal property per se. Obviously, I don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't want for anyone to get hurt. That's kind of like the top. Like, that's what before we came on air, I even said, like, I wouldn't do it. I would not want my children to do it, but like, I see it the same way. You know, like, that's not what made me mad. That's not what upset me. What upset me was the fact that I thought that was a really silly reason to go stomping through the Capitol, tearing stuff up. But that's neither here nor there. We're not going to talk about that. But yeah, like, that didn't shake me up really, because
So let me ask you this though, because my friend was like, well, if you can't see the difference between what happened in Portland and what's happening now. Okay. So what happened in Portland, or what happened in those Black Lives Matter protests versus what's happening at the Capitol, how do we really untie that? How do we untangle it? And the Black Lives Matter people are saying this is not the same thing, right? And I'm on the side of like, it's not the same thing. Black Lives Matter protests were, for the most part, peaceful protests that were first of all, they applied for a license, right? Like, and they go out there and they stayed within the confines of their license to do so, right? And then whatever, I don't know, like craziness happened may have been Antifa, blah, 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 like taking advantage of the Black Lives Matter people being there. And then you go, okay, well, now here's this Trump rally. Was there a license? What did the license look like? What was the, and then there's on the Capitol, and then there's beating Capitol policemen, and then there's storming into federal property, and there's destruction of federal property. All these things that are happening, I'm like, I feel like these things can't be equal, but I don't know exactly where they become unequal. All I know is they don't feel equal to me. And
they don't feel equal to you because they're not equal causes to you. And
it's the cause. Yes, that's where the inequality is. It's an entire population being brutalized by the government versus people mad that their guy didn't win.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got my angry mom voice on.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly
where it is. They are completely equal except for that point. There's a small percentage in each that cause trouble and give the whole movement a bad name. Mm-hmm. But the base of the movement, on one hand, I think I'm not the arbiter of truth, but on one hand, Black Lives Matter has a really good point. They have a right to be pissed off. I agree. I'm pissed off for them. The other side is whining about an outcome. Doesn't seem as important as a justification. I mean, I understand they're mad. They have a right to march and be mad. But
I think that the idea that elections can be stolen, the idea that elections can be handled dishonestly, I think that is a very important topic. Like that is something that every American should be concerned about because that is the whole process upon which our democracy rests, right? Are these elections, these people that we choose to represent us. And if those
we should audit the whole process from top to bottom.
Right. But there's a way to do that. And that's the thing that kills me about this is that these people, so the Black Lives Matter protests, they were protesting this injustice, this thing that is happening throughout the country. If you can't see it, if you refuse to see it, that is your fault. That is nobody else's fault because it is there. It exists. But this election, like this can be fixed. It can be fixed if everybody would pick better people on their ballots. Like we have done this to ourselves, right? And so that's kind of, I think that's where like it's hard for me to understand that movement because I don't think they're doing it the right way. But
they just spent 4 years saying you cannot steal an election. It's not possible. Trump was elected fairly. There was absolutely not 1 ounce of voter fraud. Now this year, there's nothing but voter fraud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pick a side, people. Stay in your lane. I don't understand.
But I think that's where it's really important that you have people within each of the parties. Because I mean, like you hear us saying these things. I mean, we're libertarians. We're totally removed from this because we don't have a dog in this fight. Maybe that's why we're like, nah, whatever. But you know, if people in those parties, in those movements would hold those factions of people who are so extreme, who do these crazy things, the things that we see as crazy, if they held them accountable, maybe this wouldn't happen. And maybe they would actually be able to work toward changing what is broken, fixing what is broken. Right. And so I think that's kind of the underlying topic is just holding each other accountable because that's how you make change. When you've got a group of people and a couple of people go off on their own, you pull them back and you say, no, that's not right. That's not how we're going to do this. This is what we need to do. That's how you progress. That's how you make change. that's how you get the things done that need to be done for the good of the people, right?
Yeah,
I
I like that.
I think you got that. I think you did a fantastic job summarizing that. And here's the thing: is ultimately, people think of their vote every 4 years, maybe every 2 years, depending on how frequently they vote, as their way of impacting that. But it's earlier than that. It's being a part of your party. It's knowing what the party stands for. It's working around legislation. It's volunteering. It's being engaged in this process and not simply showing up on the day that they need numbers. And it really is they need numbers. It's not you and we and we're all here for MAGA need numbers. It's you didn't do anything until the day they needed numbers, and you showed up and you advocated your participation to whoever had been doing it before you. And I think part of what we've been talking about for a long time has been there's a level of participation that is, I check a box. And there's a level of participation that says, this doesn't fit, and I'm not willing to work around this, and I want to participate in the anti this. And I think I'd like to spend 2021 talking to people who say what's happening right now is not good enough, and we want it to be better. How does it get better? It gets better by taking action and taking responsibility and walking out of that situation that goes, I'm good here. Everything is fine. I'll pull the lever for my straight party ticket. And saying instead, like, I'm going to do something about this. So hopefully, parenting porcupines brings some people to our party, brings some people to South Carolina Libertarian Party, brings some people to our state meetings that happen on the first Saturday of every single month at Beef O'Brady's on Hardscrabble Road in Columbia, South Carolina. And, participate in whatever way you can. Find us on Facebook. Find us on, pretty much Facebook. that's our big social media outlet. But Melissa and I are working on ranked choice voting, and we're trying to make a better process here. And we're trying to get people engaged in a way that's going to change the system. And the only way to do that is to get people to participate, like step up, do something, act. Don't just think about it. Don't just wish about it, but act about it. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Melissa. We're acting right now in our season 2, episode 1.
Yeah, anything you feel strongly about, I can almost guarantee there's a group trying to stop it, start it, whatever side you're on. Google it, find a group, get involved.
Yeah, the beauty of social media. People are out there, they're doing it, they're acting on it, right? Like, how can you not want to jump in and get all up in that? All right. Thanks everybody for being here. It's our 34 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and let's shoot it. Let's be done with it.